Someone had asked me why in these videos, why I tend to look like I'm muttering, I look like I'm speaking, or look like I'm talking in some of these videos here. You'll actually notice it in this one as well. The reason why is when you write, it's important to read your work aloud. Even in the first draft, you need to be reading it aloud. You can't just be like reading the words in your head. You can't just be, like reading something like you'd read a normal book. Whenever you write something down, whether it's the first draft or whatever draft, basically, when the words are put down or when you go to edit them, always try and say them out loud. The reason why is number one, it helps you to catch mistakes a lot easier. Usually when you read, you tend to gloss over certain words. When you read them aloud, you actually will pick up on miss words. So if there's a gap in the words, you're not gonna fill it in. Like your brain has a harder time just filling in that gap when you speak it out loud. That's part of it. Other reason why I advocate for reading aloud when you're writing is when you read your work back to yourself aloud, you can tell if a cadence is off. You can tell if it's just not working, right? Like if something sounds a little bit off, and usually that's what the process is. The process of editing is usually someone going through and reading their work or saying it aloud, and you going, it doesn't sound right. Something about the sentence is not working. There's no parallelism. Maybe there's a cadence mistake. Maybe it just does not work. Something sounds off, or it's not sounding the way you want to. It's hard to at first diagnose what it is, but you recognize there's a problem. And the best way to recognize it is by reading aloud, is by constantly saying these words out loud. That way you can study it. And so that's why you see me on these videos, why you see me kind of muttering to myself or talking to myself when I do this. I'm reading basically the sections aloud as I go through, just making sure they sound good. That way, basically if I'm going up in front of an audience, or if there's ever, you know what I mean, like not just that obviously, but if I ever do go up in front of an audience, obviously you want to be able to read it, well, but it's also so that way I can just tell if the sentence is making sense, if the prose is working. And this again is often why you'll see writers when they go to like critique groups or meetings, they'll read their work aloud, because you can tell when you read something aloud. You can tell. It's a very, very different thing. If you're someone who often does not do this, who never reads their work out loud, try and you'll begin to realize a lot of your mistakes. It's a very humbling experience at first for this. Kind of interesting, I guess, a fun little factoid. When I had first started writing, maybe my first couple of years, there was a writing group here in my area who actually, what they would do is, there was a local theater and you could actually get on a waiting list. And what they would do is about monthly, maybe every 2 months, they would have events where you would have like an author or go up there. So like, you get on a waiting list, you go up there, and a professional actor will actually read your work aloud in front of an audience. These were works in progress. These were not finished works by any means. Just something that you've been personally working on, that you've been struggling with. You would actually read it aloud in front of an audience. And kind of the fun thing is you hear your work read aloud the first time by someone that's not you, that doesn't read things in your particular cadence, in your particular kind of vocalization. And it sounds weird, right? Like you can get certain parts that are just not going to work. There are some that sound fantastic. You're like, wow, that's amazing. This is really good. But there are certain parts where the writing feels very, very awkward when someone reads it aloud, and that's what you go back, and that's what you would go back and you would fix. And it's an amazing, amazing tool, and that's often where I think people tend to maybe fall off with the process. They might be really, really good editors, might be really good at studying the page, at looking at it, at glancing at it, making small corrections in the document or in their head, but they're missing the ability to read it out loud. And that's the way that your audience is going to read it. Even if they don't physically read it aloud, when someone reads it in their own head, they're going to notice the mistakes, not you, because they didn't spend, years and years looking at this prose. Right? And so when you read it aloud, it feels like the very first time that a stranger has actually ever read this. And it's often a good way to mimic how it's going to feel when a stranger actually does come across your work. And so, yeah, so like I said, this video is more just answering that question, but it's also, again, for the audience here, just to help you all kind of get a feel for why I do that, and perhaps impress upon you that if you're not reading your work aloud, to start trying, because it's an amazing tool. It's an amazing editing tool. And again, it's something that I've done throughout the entire process of writing.